Welcome back. You watch your morning live. Now, if you're currently in pain and are struggling to accept losing someone you deeply cared for, then this is for you. In her latest book, Shirley Hugo, a Bloemfontein-based psychologist, touches on a subject that we can all relate to, and that is dealing with the trauma caused by death. Her read, that's titled The Stories of Lost You Are Not Alone, walks us through different stages of mourning a loved one, as well as giving us an insight into how to come to terms with letting go of the deceased. Shirley now joins us from our Durban studios. Shirley, thank you very much for joining us. Maybe the pertinent question is to talk about why you felt the need to give the examples that you've done in the book, and we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. But what was the reason for putting this book together?
Morning, Sam, and the weekend live viewers. The reason why I wrote this book was to share what I was experiencing with my clients. And I realized that there are more people out there who are going through this kind of loss and who need such counseling. And maybe if they can know that there are other people out there who are going through the same situation, they will realize that they are not alone, and they will go for counseling or even talk to the people they can confide on. But it's important to deal with the loss because it affects your life later on in even the decision making that you do. Once you go through a loss, it affects you. So it's very important to deal with your loss.
I think one of the big things that comes through, and one of the overarching themes, is that when people lose a loved one, there's a lot of other things we don't necessarily consider. One of the things you mentioned in the book is if you're a partner in a relationship and you've lost your husband and your wife, all of a sudden you have to take up those duties because they don't go away. And I think maybe there's an interesting understanding here that we don't often think of loss like that. We only think of the person that is gone.
Yes, that's right, Sam. Actually, in my book, I've got a chapter where I wrote, "When is love dangerous?" That's exactly what happened there, where the mother lost her husband and forgot about dealing with her own loss, but tried replacing the husband. And this was in a bad way because it ended up with the mother losing the son, because she was actually spoiling her more than guiding her, trying to replace the husband. And this son was not adjusting to the loss of the father, but was taking advantage of the support of being spoiled by the mother, and lost the actual guidance from the father that he had earlier on. And it ended up being stabbed and died very tragically. So it's very important to deal with the loss and what it means to you, trying to adjust and say, now, how do I move on with my life from here? Rather than to say, how do I replace so-and-so? But you have to deal with yourself. What does this mean to me now?
In that equation, when dealing with loss, and I know that there isn't a one-fit-all solution, but what is the overarching priority is that you look at how it affects you first before you deal with anybody else.
Yes, that is very important. I know that with the issues of culture, a person is rushed to be told, you must sit down, you must do this. But we also have to understand the loss that when you are told you have lost your husband, you should be given a minute to react. People react in a different way. Others will not show emotions. Others will scream, and you can't scream sitting down. You understand? And you have to deal with that process, and then you go through all the stages until you get to acceptance that, okay, I've lost my husband. Now, what do I do next? It's a process. So I think it's also important for people around you, your siblings, your colleagues, and your other family members, and the community members general, to understand that there's no one-size-fits-all. People respond differently to loss, and also how you move on. It will depend on the resources available to you. Others move very easily, others struggle for years.
You've kept the book, in my opinion, very pocket-sized. It's quite easy to read. It's not difficult. You've used examples. You talk about Mrs. Tota. That's the first example with her son. There's also Maki. There's also Mdlamini. In one case, the woman has a miscarriage. In the other case, her daughter is violently killed in front of her. And then you also provide the resolutions. What do you want people to take away from this book?
You know, Sam, why I wrote such a pocket-sized book, I wanted people to say they can read it. I don't want people to say I'm not good in reading or I'm not into novels. This is a very easy book to read. Even the font, it makes it easier for somebody. And I want it to be such that when you read that story, the chapter, you don't put the book down before you finish it. And you get a lesson. And you are able to identify that this Maggie, this story is similar to so and so in my family, in my community, and be able, when you go back to work, to say, okay, now I know what she's going through, this is what I can do. Now I know what he is going through, and this is what I can do to provide support.
Very quickly, 5 seconds, where can people get hold of the book if they're interested? Shirley?
I'm on Facebook as Shirley Hugo. They can inbox me or email me to myshi.hugo@gmail.com.
Shirley, thank you very much. Shirley Hugo is a psychologist by profession, talking to us about her latest offering called Stories of Loss, You Are Not Alone. And it really deals and focuses on how one overcomes losing a loved one or when you're affected by death. Go and read, talk about it. It'll be an interesting read. We take it out, break. Don't go anywhere.